Presentation on the Romantic poet John Keats. He famously said, "If poetry comes not as naturally as the leaves to a tree, it had better not come at all." In Keats's personal life, he was a great Romantic poet, inspired by classics, early Renaissance literature. He initially trained as an apothecary and a surgeon, but gave it up. Sadly, he died young from tuberculosis, like many other great authors, such as Orwell. In Keats' case, he died at just 25. He was energized, like many other romantics, like Coleridge, by nature, friends, acquaintances, lovers, such as Fanny Brawne. The picture shows The Wonder Above the Sea Fog by Caspar David Friedrich, an American artist, showing the mysterious nature of Romanticism. Romantic movement was a big movement, and this will only just go into it briefly. Romanticism has a wide literary meaning, covering a range of developments in art, literature, music, and philosophy spanning the late 18th and 19th centuries. Key idea in Romantic poetry is the concept of the sublime, which means the feelings people experience when they see awesome landscapes or find themselves in extreme situations, such as in the picture, which shows the storming of the Bastille, which was an initial event in the French Revolution. The Romantics renounced rationalism and order associated with the preceding Enlightenment era, stressing the importance of expressing authentic personal feelings. So it was a move towards a subjective perspective on reality. This is a picture of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and he was a famous person in the Romantic movement, a Genevan philosopher, writer, and composer who influenced society with an increased focus on subjectivity and introspection. He wrote a sentimental novel called Julie, or The New Heloise, which was an important development in pre-Romanticism and romanticism in fiction. It was, again, a return to subjectivism and sensibility. Most famously, in 1762, Rousseau declared in The Social Contract that man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. So this was a kind of call to arms, in a sense. During the French Revolution, Rousseau was the most popular of the philosophers among the members of the Jacobin Club, which was an anti-royalist society. In the 19th century, there were interesting events happening in religion. Prescriptive religion was still dominant, but reforms started to change society. The Protestant Church of England was very powerful. Until 1829, anybody holding British public office had to make a public oath denying Catholic doctrines. Nevertheless, religion inspired great reformers, such as William Wilberforce in the picture on the right. He supported the campaign for the complete abolition of slavery. The Slave Trade Act in 1807 was supported by him, and later the Abolition of Slavery Act in 1833. Interestingly, one of his sons was Samuel Wilberforce, who had a slightly more narrow outlook and was one of Charles Darwin's great critics. He said, in the top right corner, "If to be feelingly alive to the sufferings of my fellow creatures is to be a fanatic, I am one of the most incurable fanatics ever permitted to be at large." Keats and lyrical ballads. So the ballad is a long poem in short stanzas that tells a song-like story. Ballads feature in ancient literature such as the Homeric epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Very famously in 1798, a book called Lyrical Ballads featuring poetry by Wordsworth and Coleridge was published. The first poem in the collection was The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Coleridge. In 1819, Keats wrote a ballad, La Belle Dames sans Merci, which is shown in a picture form here by the pre-Raphaelite painter John William Waterhouse in 1893. We will look at this poem in a little bit more detail in the next slide. So the ballad La Belle Dame sans Merci by Keats is an example of his poetic preoccupation with love and death. A narrative poem, it takes the reader on a magic realist journey with fantastical elements such as a fairy's child and an elfin grot. It is simple in structure. The poem employs 12 quatrains, a verse with 4 lines, in an A-B-C-B rhyme scheme. Generally, its meter is iambic tetrameter, which means there are four iambs per line, 8 syllables, with an increasing shortening at the end of each verse. So on the right, you can see an example of one of the poem's quatrains. And here it says, "She took me to her elfin grot, and there she wept inside full sore, and there I shut her wild, wild eyes with kisses four." And the painting is showing the knight and the seductive woman, the fairy's child. So Keats was a fan of something called negative capability. He said negative capability is when a man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. So he was a fan of the subjective realm, perhaps more so than the objective realm. This may have been a protest against his life, which he was sick for most of his life, so perhaps he didn't want to look at fact and reason. With negative capability, Keats captures the sublime, mysterious, and beautiful nature of life. In poems such as La Belle Dame, Keats displays a sensitive and subjective perspective of reality. According to Professor Rustin, writing in the British Library, Keats believed scientific knowledge ruins our sense of beauty. He relished in Shakespeare's mystery and passion. Keats found as much delight in a Iago, a nefarious character in Othello, as in Imogen, a beautiful heroine in Cymbeline. And in the background, we can see a picture by the famous artist Turner showing fishermen at sea. He captured the sublime in his paintings. Another great poem by Keats was called An Ode to a Nightingale. Ode to a Nightingale is one of the 5 great odes John Keats composed in the summer and autumn of 1819. The sublime song of the Nightingale had long been a source of poetic inspiration. For example, Milton's sonnet in 1645 poems, and Andrew Marvell's The Mower to the Glowworms in 1681. Marvell was one of the metaphysicals. The poem is an intense meditation on the contrast between the painful mortality that defines human existence and the immortal beauty, according to Hebron 2014. Therefore, this ode is an example of Keatsian negative capability, this sort of willingness to see the duality of life, both the good and the bad. And a great little stanza in the poem goes, "Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled a long age in the deep-delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and Provençal song and sunburnt mirth." And it sounds to me almost like one is enjoying a cool beer, and the beer is nature. And this is a picture of one of Keats's friends called Joseph Severn, and it's his depiction of Keats listening to the Nightingale, which can be seen in the top left of that picture. And Keats, though he was a romantic and sort of 18th and early 19th century, he influenced later poets such as Wilfred Owen, the great war poet famous for Dulce decorum est. Wilfred Owen was obsessed by the romantic poetry and what he considered the equally romantic life of John Keats. According to Gilbert 2016, both poets allude to death and despair in their poems Dulce decorum est, which is in the bottom right of this slide, and La Belle Dame, Keats the top picture. Linguistically, there are similarities too. So apart from the allusions to death and despair, the 2 extracts also use exclamatives to depict the horror and urgency of conflict, the energy, that sense of what's coming. According to Gilbert, 2016, in Anthem for Doomed Youth, a sonnet by Owen, Owen is engaged in a struggle with his own admiration for Keatsian romantic tradition. So that is the end of this presentation. I hope you have enjoyed it. It is my first presentation using this system, and these are my sources. You can see I've used a lot from the British Library, which is great, Wikipedia, and something from BBC Bite Size. In the background, you can see a mask made of John Keats during his life. What a great poet he is. and I hope that you take an interest in his poetry now. All the best. Bye.